Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started today? On behalf of the Northwest Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, I welcome you to today's webinar, A Recovery-Oriented Approach to Professional Boundaries with Dr. Patricia Deegan. We're really grateful so many of you could join us to learn more about this important topic today, and we're looking forward to sharing more information and tips and guidance and to having some exchange of information with all of you toward the end. My name is Maria Monroe DeVita, and I'm one of the core faculty with the Northwest Mhttc. I'm also an associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry at University of Washington. Let's first start just with a little introduction to the MHTTC. The MHTTC network is nationwide and supported by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA. Our purpose includes disseminating and implementing evidence-based practices in behavioral health. The goals of the network include supporting mental health-related evidence-based practices, heightening the awareness, knowledge, and skills of the workforce, fostering regional and national alliances, and providing and connecting you to free training and technical assistance. Now, a little something about the Northwest MHTTC. The Northwest MHTTC is based at the University of Washington in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. We provide training and technical assistance in evidence-based practices to Region 10, which includes Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. Our area of focus is evidence-based practices for treating psychosis and other serious mental illnesses, including, for example, sort of community treatment and cognitive behavioral therapy for psychosis. We also provide training on a variety of topics, including integrated care, suicide prevention, diversity, equity, and inclusion, school mental health, peer support, trauma-informed approaches, and many others. Our target workforce includes behavioral health and primary care providers, school and social service staff, and others who work and have the potential to improve behavioral health outcomes for individuals with or at risk of developing serious mental illnesses. And we fulfill our mission through live events like this webinar that we'll also record and post later. You'll be hearing more about that later. Virtual learning communities, free self-paced online courses, newsletters, and our resource library on our website, and connection to other training centers and events. And if you would like to sign up and learn more about future training activities or sign up to get our newsletter, you can feel free to sign up at the link on this slide. Today's presentation also reaches a broader swath of our MHTTC friends and across the network. So some of you are joining us from other states, and we're really excited about that and appreciate you being here. Just a couple of quick notes before we get started. One is that it's always our intention to be mindful of using language that promotes recovery and culturally appropriate terminology. We encourage all of you to use language that demonstrates respect for a person's dignity and worth. It's consistent with recovery-oriented practices and promotes treatment environments that foster respect, human dignity, and hope. We also right now want to review the logistics regarding communication during today's session. So we've made every attempt to make today's presentation secure. If we need to end the presentation unexpectedly, we will follow up using your registration information. Due to the large audience, all attendees are muted and not appearing on video. Chat is only visible to our team unless you select for it to go to all panelists and attendees. So make sure you kind of check that ahead of time so you know who it's going to. The presentation is being recorded. The recording and the slides will be made available on our website in a few weeks, which you'll be notified of by mail or by email. We ask you to be mindful to avoid disclosing identifying details about persons receiving services if you share a question or scenario. You will receive an email within 2 weeks on how to access a certificate of attendance if you desire that, but there are not formal CEUs available for this webinar. Lastly, your feedback is crucial to our work, so we'd appreciate your response to a very short survey that just takes a few minutes after the session. Our team will share that link by the chat box today and by an email reminder tomorrow. We're required by SAMHSA to conduct this survey, but we also really appreciate that kind of feedback about our various sessions and want to plan for future sessions based on your feedback. So your participation in completing those evaluations is really important to us. Lastly, we'll be monitoring the QA box to facilitate answering as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. So as you have specific questions that you want to ask Pat, please type them in the Q&A box at any point through the presentation, and then we'll circle back to you later at the very end. We'll reserve some time for Q&A. Our team will moderate and share questions with Pat. We might provide a short written response during the webinar or field live as time allows, but we will do our best to get an answer to you regardless. And there will be some times when Pat is going to pose a question for you to ponder. She just wants your feedback on something, or we'll be asking you to kind of be thinking about how some of what she's presenting sort of relates to you. So go ahead and enter those responses in the chat. And again, remember to select panelists and all attendees, so others can kind of see what you're sharing in that. So you don't have to put it in the Q&A when she asks for those things. And if you're experiencing any technical issues, please use the chat and our MHTTC staff will assist. You can just send that directly to panelists only. SAMHSA sponsors this work, but does not reflect any official position on this content. And now for the important part, which is our presenter today. She is one of my all-time heroes in the field, so it is all the more personally exciting for me to have the opportunity to introduce her to you. Patricia Deegan Phd. Her mission is to help activate and empower mental health services users in their own recovery and to provide peer supporters and clinicians with the know-how to support people in their recovery journey. She is uniquely positioned to fulfill her vocation because she was diagnosed with schizophrenia as a teenager, went on to get her doctorate in clinical psychology, and today leads a company run by and for people in recovery. And now I'll turn it over to our presenter, Dr. Patricia Deegan.
Well, thank you so much, Maria.
Thank you, Pat.
Yeah, I'll take a moment and share my screen. Okay. Let's see. Okay. All right. Hey guys. I believe you're out there. I definitely can't see you, but I do believe you're out there. Thanks for coming today. I know we're all awfully busy these days, and I know it means a lot to carve out 90 minutes, but thank you for taking the time. And I just want to start by reflecting a little bit on these times. These are extraordinary times, and I think sometimes in this last year, we've seen the most beautiful parts of our shared humanity, and we've seen some of the uglier parts of it too. And I keep looking around, saying to myself, now, where are the grown-ups? Who's in charge here? And I realize, holy cow, where are the grown-ups? Where are the grown-ups, guys? Wow, that's something to really think about here. And but I think that one of the things that has just consistently moved my heart in very powerful ways are the ways that people out there on the front lines like yourself are continuing to meet the needs of folks who have diagnoses, of folks who are on their journey of recovery. And you're doing it via telehealth, and you're doing it by getting out there with masks on and connecting with people. And I just continue to be impressed over and over again that this job is really not about the paycheck, because honestly, there really are much easier ways to make a living. And, that's something I think we all know, and yet we stick with the work. And that's important, that each and every one of us know our why. Why do we stick with this work? Why do we show up at work tomorrow when it might be easier just to roll over and stay in bed? And what I have noticed is that the folks who are hanging in here, the folks who are continuing to provide services, are people themselves who have known some adversity in their life, are people who understand what it means to be up against difficult times and to make a passage through really difficult times. And I say that because I personally know that through my own passage after having been diagnosed with a psychotic disorder as a young person. But the truth is, I know you know that too, or you wouldn't be showing up at work every day. That within each of us who remain in this field, remain dedicated to it, remain dedicated to the individuals who are showing up for care, many of whom, our larger society would like to see, kind of pushed off to the side and be less visible. But we feel in our hearts that this work is important for us to do. And that the reason I think we are able to show up each and every day with our hearts open, willing and able to connect in skilled ways with human beings to support their transformation and growth is because we too have been through a difficult passage, and that we are carrying a kind of hope. And I say that with all seriousness. I believe that our hope that human lives can be transformed in and through difficult challenges is what draws us to this work every day. I remember Lily Tomlin, when she was doing her one-woman play, Signs of Intelligent Life in the Universe, and she would be a role-playing a street person, and Trudy would say to us, we have to practice aerobics, aerobics, because when we think about what it is we do day in and day out, is that we have the extraordinary privilege of participating in lives rebirthing themselves, lives that maybe hit this wall, and life knocks the individual down, and yet they are, as I've written about it before poetically, on lopped limbs, rising to a new life, as hard and as challenging. Maybe even sometimes it feels like the odds are against us. That's what they said about me, that I would be sick for the rest of my life and that I was chronic undifferentiated schizophrenia. And yet we're here. And that when we can step back from it just a bit and say, this work really matters. It really matters. And that I want to thank you for it. I want to thank you for showing up every day.
Hi, you've reached Patricia Deegan.
And it matters. And thank you. And with that, I want to get into a bit about professional boundaries. And it's an interesting topic. There's not a lot written on this whole area of professional boundaries. Clearly, we all come into the field and we receive our training, whether we're trained as peer specialists with our certification, or social workers, bachelor level, PhDs, no matter, we all go through our ethics courses, and we all learn through sort of clinical folklore, sort of the clinical oral tradition about this interesting construct that's called professional boundaries. But I think what's important is that really what our boundaries, professional boundaries, is really all about is human relationship, ultimately. And it's that complex. And so my goal here today is to present you with a method for thinking systematically about how to formulate and co-create professional boundaries and respectful boundaries with the folks that we're working with. So, as I said, the task here is to think about boundaries as a means to building relationships that are going to support individuals in their recovery. And whether we're a health coach or a supported employment and education specialist, a drug alcohol counselor, a certified peer specialist, a psychiatrist, our relationships with people are the most important tool that we have in supporting people on their journey of recovery. I call my work and all of the presentations I give part of my common ground approach, because I believe that our shared humanity is the common ground on which we meet people, right? I have never, in my entire 30 years working in the field, heard somebody share a recovery narrative with me and they said, it was that stellar, aloof, distanced, professional attitude that helped me recover. Instead, what you hear from people are those moments when we connect as human beings, right? I remember a young man who had spent 5 years on a forensic inpatient unit. And I asked him about his recovery and what helped. And I said, 5 years is a long time to be inpatient. And he said, yeah. And he said, but there was this one psych aide who would come onto the unit for his shift 5 days a week. And he said, I'd be sitting there on one of those green couch things with the TV going in the day room. And he would come on the floor for his shift. And he would look over at me, wink, and say, Danny Ainge, and motion that he was sinking a three-pointer. And for those of you who aren't Celtics fans, we know who Danny Ainge is. Pretty good ball player, or was. Anyway, so it was that moment of all the moments that he chooses to tell me about. And nobody trained that psych technician to be able to do that. And a lot of other very good things needed to happen in order for this person to get the support he needed in his recovery. But as a human being, what he remembers as the key was a human connection, right? And that's what I mean about the starting point of all our recovery-oriented work is the common ground of our shared humanity. That's where all the work begins. And so no matter what our professional role is, we really have to take great care in building relationships that, yes, convey hope, even during the toughest of times. And one of the toughest aspects of this is how do we think about boundaries in this context of recognizing the importance of creating the common ground of our shared humanity as a starting point. And, you know, I'll be honest with you, I've been to a lot of different programs and organizations, agencies all over our great country. And the rules and policies and procedures when it comes to professional boundaries are all over the place and getting more all over the place with regard to the advent of social media and Dr. Google. And boy, there are a lot of complexities that we're managing out there in terms of these things we call boundaries. Let me just give you a couple of examples of how like all over the place thinking gets about professional boundaries, because we speak about it as if it's this monolithic thing. Oh yes, professional boundaries, of course. But we often mean very different things by that. So I'll never forget going into a county in one state where there was a large county mental health provider where staff were truly, it was highly recommended that staff not live in the same county that they were providing mental health services in. And I found that interesting. And I asked, well, why? And a county supervisor guy actually said to me, well, you know, you wouldn't want to meet a client in the grocery store. Okay. I don't know why, but you wouldn't want to, I guess, in that county, you know. Or another example, I remember working with folks in an agency, doing training for them on professional boundaries, where when I started, the policy of the organization was, you know how radios have buttons that you can preload with your favorite stations? You didn't want to ever let a client who you were, you know, given a ride somewhere, press those buttons because they would know what kind of music you preferred. And this was residential programming. Or even one program where staff were expected to drive people around as part of their work, but secondly, were told to shave off any bumper stickers they had on their car for fear of it being a boundary violation and clients knowing more about the individual. So, and then of course, there's always places where it's like, well, yeah, just anything goes, you know, boundaries, really, really loose boundaries. And I think a lot of this comes out of the fact that really, when you get right down to it, where did this notion of boundaries come from? Professional boundaries, it really dates back to Freud, quite honestly, and the old idea of the analysis of transference and the importance of the analyst of being neutral blank tabula rasa onto which the analysand could project their primal fantasies, etc., and have those analyzed, interpreted, and fed back by the neutral analyst. So the idea was that we weren't to reveal, that we were married or that we were, whatever. So I think it's a bit of a mess out there. And a lot of us just are kind of trying to do our best with it, but it can get sticky. So just to give you some examples, I'm interested in your thoughts on this. And if you could just put it in the, we don't have a poll function, so you have to pop it in the chat, right?
Say that again. I'm sorry, Pat.
Is it going into chat or is it going into Q&A?
So right now we just had one comment. I'm happy to share it.
No, I mean, in terms of I'm going to do I want people to give me an answer here.
Oh, yes. Yeah, they would put it into the chat. And if you could just select all attendees and all panelists, if you'd like to share your responses with everyone rather than just the panelists, that would be nice if we could do that. So you put it into the chat, not the Q&A box.
Okay. So generally speaking, in general, if an individual you work with asks about your religion or spiritual practice or lack thereof, is it okay to share that information? And I understand that I'm asking for a forced choice because instinctively what we want to do is say it depends. And what we mean by that is it depends on my level of comfort with the client that I'm working with. But I'm asking you to just say, in general, with this amount of information, yes or no. Maria, can you just give me a sense of the—
Sure, yeah, lots of different ones. No, it depends.
It depends. No, it depends.
Yep. Yes. Couple yeses, several yeses. No, depends. No, yes.
Yeah.
All over.
Yeah, it is all over. It's a tough one. And frankly, we are not trained in how to think about this in a very coherent and consistent fashion. Let's try another. You're driving your kid to piano lessons in a bad rainstorm and see a person you work with soaked and trying to make it home. Is it okay to offer the person a ride? Yes or no?
Quite a mix. Yes, no, depends.
Depends.
Depends. Lots of depends. Yep.
Yeah, it depends. So
Yeah.
somehow in those it depends responses, we have a sense that things are not just cookbook, right? And that's important that you guys are picking up on that already, right? So, the idea that there is some kind of proverbial cookbook out there that has the exact recipe for every contingency, of course, that doesn't exist, nor will it ever. So there's something going on here. Let's try another one. You are concerned about someone you are working with and haven't been able to reach them. Is it okay to check their Facebook page or just to generically Google them? Think about why or why not, but give me yeses and nos.
A mix of yes and nos. I would say maybe a little more on the no's than yeses on this one.
Interesting.
Somebody's suggesting jail tracker first, checking there. If they've given permission is another.
Sure.
And in the last couple, there were things like, concerns about legal, or that with the kids in the car with kids in, that would make a difference, or if they were using their work car or not.
Right. That's why I put it, the kid, you were driving the kid to the piano.
Yep.
Yeah, because that begins to change our formulation, right? So it becomes very interesting to try to think through what are these it-depend contingencies that are shaping and factors that are shaping our response in any individual situation. And that's exactly what I'm going to try to offer you is an algorithm, a framework for systematically thinking about these situations, which happen all the time. But first, I want to share something with you that sometimes I think we don't think about as clinicians. And the truth is, I think that many people who are working on their recovery actually report being hurt by the way professionals communicate about professional boundaries. A common example that I hear when I talk with people using services is this one. A person like this young man here offering case manager or peer specialist or a therapist offering a holiday, a gift on a holiday, just a small holiday gift. And staff saying things like, thanks, but I can't accept the gift. It's against company policy. And people get very hurt by these kinds of responses, particularly people who are new to the system. People who have been in the system a while typically know better than to ask this kind of, to do this kind of thing or to ask these kinds of questions. But especially for people who are newer to the system, they go out of their way to buy the gift or to make the gift, and to have it dismissed, in this fashion can feel pretty lousy, and it can actually harm our relationship with the human beings that we're trying to work with. And it's really interesting because it's not like when people come into services, we hand them a rule book about this, right? The only way you can figure it out is by getting it wrong. And all of a sudden, I'll never forget being on an inpatient unit and deciding that a bathroom was a bathroom was a bathroom. And the fact that it said staff bathroom on it didn't impress me. So I headed on in, and boy, I learned about that boundary, and that distinction really quickly. So way back in the 90s, when I started work on professional boundaries and trying to figure out what they were all about, I did a lot of surveying in organizations that I consulted with. And one in particular was a large residential provider. And I conducted a survey of clients regarding their experiences of professional boundaries. And certainly not all the stories that I heard were hurtful, but some were. And I just want to give you a feel for what people are, reporting does not work for them. And I think you'll agree. So the individual asks a staff person, in this case it was residential staff, are you married? And the response was, do you see a ring on my finger? And why didn't you come in on Monday? That's not your business. Or where are you going on your vacation? That's not appropriate for you to know. Do you have a boyfriend? This was a survey. I didn't make this stuff up. There are certain things you need to know about me and certain things you don't. I could see where that would be painful and damage my relationship. So I saw on the internet that you were at the anti-abortion rally. That's a boundary violation. Let's talk about how you came across that information. And that's that old two-step thing we do. Instead of answering the question, you do this very cool maneuver, which is to say, well, first tell me why do you want to know? Why do you want to know, right? So these are really real things. And we want to stay away from these kinds of responses, right? So because I think boundaries is a tricky topic. And this word boundary conjures images of a wall or a barrier. And when professional boundaries are construed as walls or lines that should not be crossed, our relationships with the people that we serve can definitely suffer. It's really hard to build a relationship around a wall. So this notion of boundaries as a wall that shouldn't bend, shouldn't be crossed, as I mentioned, actually comes from the whole Freudian analytics, which most of us are not trained in, frankly. And so in psychoanalysis, boundaries really are walls, but they shouldn't be in our work. And the reason is because walls are hard and they're rigid and they're unbending. And when professional boundaries are applied in this kind of formulaic way, staff can appear aloof, distanced, and the individual can feel estranged or even like they've done something wrong in asking a simple question like, where have you been on vacation? Or if we have kids. And so what I want us to learn is a different way, where I'm proposing that boundaries are not walls. I believe that boundaries need to be consistent. I'm not one of these, hey, if it feels good, do it kinds of people. We need to be consistent. And that we need to have a standard, consistent approach to boundaries and relationship building, but not a rigid cookbook approach. It needs to be flexible. And what that means is that we need to be able to be flexible, responsive to the individual that we're working with and about the individual situation at that moment that we're interacting with. So we need to be flexible, but also consistent. And finally, I think because boundaries involve two people, we need to recognize that ultimately boundaries, relational boundaries, are co-created with program participants. That our job is not to impose like a wall, these rigid boundaries, rather we're co-creating the boundary with each individual that we're working with. So that's what I'm going for here. I'm going for consistent, flexible, and co-created. So, and I would say that boundaries are a very important part of our work, even though they're not walls, and that it includes sort of a mandate to recognize that ultimately work in the human services is work done by human beings, and that even professional staff, as professional staff, we also have our personal and professional limits, our personal and professional boundaries, our limits, right? But at the same time, we need to balance those with an individual's need to feel connected with us. These kinds of questions, hey, where are you going on vacation, can be very much about just trying to have that connection, maybe wanting some reassurance, you're coming back, that kind of thing. So what I've done is created, after all of this, surveying and hearing stories and trying to find the pattern of what was going on, I finally arrived at a 5-part algorithm. And an algorithm is just a type of a formula, if you will, for solving a problem. So if we think of every time we feel that a situation or an individual is challenging a personal, professional boundary, we need to say, okay, well, what if I applied the algorithm? How could I make my way through the situation? So I'll show you how that works. So imagine that a person says to us, we don't need to know a whole lot about this person at this time, because I'm just trying to teach you the algorithm, the 5-part algorithm. Have you ever taken psych meds? They ask their worker or psychiatrist or whomever. So is it a violation of professional boundaries to answer the question? And so here we go with the algorithm. It's a 5-part algorithm. It can be applied to any situation where you're unsure of how to respond. And that basically the algorithm says that there are 5 factors: ethics, we have role expectations, we have clinical concerns, we have our own personal limits, and then of course, clients and individuals have their own preferences as well. And so when faced with a situation like, have you ever used psych meds? We need to apply these 5 factors, these 5 rules, in order to come up with the best answer so that we build up relationships that are really healthy and that support recovery. And I think that this will help us achieve not rigid walls, but or unbending rules, but just rather a dynamic process that's consistent, that is flexible, and that is responsive to the needs of individuals, both the needs of the practitioner and the needs of the person we're working with. So the first factor is ethics. And I think we all know a bit about ethics. We've all had an ethics course or two in our day. And I define ethics, pretty straightforwardly. It's when we use the power that's inherent in our position, and we use that power in our relationship for personal gain. And this is exploitation. So again, exploitation means using the power that's inherent in our position to take advantage of or to make personal gains through our association with individuals, clients. So these are some of the ones I ran into in my field work there. Planning an outing that serves our needs and the client's needs. It's a tricky one. So an example that really set this off in my thinking was a residential worker, and part of their responsibility was to meet up with an individual resident and decide on what they were going to do together that day. And the residential worker had a little one at home and needed some diapers. And the resident wasn't averse to going and picking up a few things at the grocery store. So, hey, why not do both, right? And I think that that's a little tricky. That's a very slippery slope, because given all things being equal, the individual might have said, no, I got to go to the cleaners today. I don't need to swing by a grocery store to pick up or a convenience store to pick up diapers. Another example might be, of course, sexual or romantic contact, and under no circumstances may this happen, of course, and additionally, abuse of any kind that violates individuals, including verbal, emotional, physical, or sexual abuse. But I think importantly, I think it's also coercion, just straight out coercion, which is the use of our power to coerce or force a client to do something. So for instance, I believe it is unethical, truly unethical, to frighten a client into medication compliance by threatening them, however subtly, with involuntary commitment to a hospital. You know, I believe that does fit the definition of an ethics violation, using fear. Okay, so if we look at our example by the first factor, have you ever taken psych meds? Is it a violation of ethics to answer this question? And the answer is no, of course it's not. It's not exploitative, it's not abusive, it's not otherwise unethical to answer the question, hey, staff person, do you take psych meds? But that's only the first step. And here comes step 2. The second part is role expectations, right? Professional boundaries are shaped by the role that we're being paid to perform, right? And role expectations are genuine, just like ethics, are consistent. They're not terribly flexible, nor are ethics flexible. They just are, right? So they're consistent across situations, right? So we're meeting that criteria of consistency here with these 2 factors. So I think every person working in our field does have a role, and there are different expectations depending on what our role is. For instance, peer staff, it's expected as part of the work that we disclose aspects of our personal recovery story as part of our role. That's a role expectation. Now, psychiatrists and others in more traditional clinical roles do not routinely disclose, although under some circumstances they do, right? But it's not a role expectation. Conversely, it is within the role of the psychiatrist, of course, or the psychiatric care provider to prescribe medicine, but this is not an expectation when we're working as peer staff, right? So here are some examples of boundary violations in terms of role expectations. That would be, no matter what your role is in behavioral health, sexual, drug, alcohol, or criminal exploits, stories of encounters and drinking and drugging, or illegal activity, these just don't belong in the relationship, meaning ours, not the client's stuff, our stuff, right? Another violation of a role expectation might be sharing or our own secrets, or keeping the individual's secrets, or gossiping about the agency in particular, gossiping about the supervisor, telling insider information about the person's therapist. This is really not okay in terms of our role expectation. Another example might be compromising another person's protected health information and breaching confidentiality. And finally, I think importantly, that our disclosure of information really, no matter what role we're in, should never be ego-driven. And so what that means is, like, let's say it's a role expectation for peer specialists that we do disclosure. But sometimes disclosure can become all about me bragging about how awesome I am. Then all of a sudden, that's driven by my ego, not by the needs of the individual that we're working with. So no matter what your role, a therapist, case manager, wellness coach, drug alcohol counselor, whatever it is, the guiding rule for any kind of disclosure in terms of role expectations is, does this help the individual I'm working with and support their recovery? So when someone we work with asks, have you ever taken psych meds? Would answering this question be within your role as a worker? And I think that disclosure, when it's guided by the needs of our clients, is really just plain old okay. Not just in and of itself, but just, as we see later, there are other factors that we have to take into account. So there's nothing inherently wrong, inherently in the role of a peer staff or clinicians or a psychiatrist that would say answering the question about whether or not I use psych drugs is okay or not. So here's the third factor in the algorithm, clinical concerns. Now, clinical concerns are very, very specific, and they relate to an individual. So an example might be that a person has a history of childhood sexual abuse and domestic violence and has trouble trusting male staff. That would be a clinical concern that would help to formulate a boundary, an interpersonal boundary, right? Or a person might have spent time in a forensic facility for stalking a college teacher. That's something that the care team needs to take into account in thinking about how we conduct ourselves and how that clinical concern mitigates our relationship with an individual. Another example, well, those are two good examples. And clinical concerns are not specific to a diagnosis, mind you, right? Clinical concerns are really related to individual factors that are of concern to the team and that will help to shape and think about how to have the most supportive relationship with the individual. So we would never say we must never share information with people diagnosed with borderline personality disorder because they are known to have terrible boundaries, or they'll never stop calling your home, or they'll, we don't go there. That's not recovery-oriented practice at all, okay? That really is a very unfair and often untrue value judgment that's based on a diagnosis and not the individual. So clinical concerns always have to be guided by the individual that we're working with. And I feel very strongly that if, as a team, we do have clinical concerns, and those concerns inform how we build relationships with an individual, right? That it becomes important for the team to document that, so everyone on the team is on board. And so I would say that we can't just say, as an organization or as a team, one may never share their sexual, if asked, one may never share their sexual orientation with an individual they're working with. However, if an individual is struggling with a lot of homophobic content, right, then it might be best not to share. The team might decide, if asked about sexual orientation, the team will defer, and then we'll have an open conversation with the individual about that. So we need to document that kind of decision making, I think. Okay. So for the purposes of our example, let's just say that there are no clinical concerns that have been identified by the team. That brings us to the fourth rule in the algorithm. And the fourth rule that helps determine professional boundaries are our own personal limits. And this is an important point, that we do get to say what our own personal limits are. Because it's important to know that sometimes as professionals, depending on our proximal experiences, sometimes our personal limits shrink and sometimes they grow. And that's called being human. So remember working with staff on inpatient units who had been assaulted, right? And like, it's understandable at that time that a personal limit might atrophy a little at that point, right? Or not atrophy, but just constrict. And over time, as healing takes place, reconciliation takes place, that we can heal from that and begin to open back up again. So this fourth rule is all about our own personal limits. Here are some examples. Am I willing to share where I live? I am not willing to share about my medical conditions. I am willing to share that I am married. I am not willing to accept a friend request from a client on Facebook. All of these are examples of personal limits. And again, it's important that we be able to articulate our personal limits. And toward that end, I've given you a handy dandy worksheet examining my personal boundaries, my personal limits, right? And basically, this helps me develop a personal profile for my current personal limits and boundaries. It helps me create my own profile. Now, I can't tell you how important this is. I know we're all busy and we have way too much to do, right? But in my opinion, this should be part of the onboarding of every single staff person. I don't care what your credentials and degrees are, okay? If I'm not prepared to know where I stand in terms of my personal limits with regard to, am I willing to answer questions about past use of street drugs? Because when the question gets asked, I feel like, whoa, wait a minute, I got to think about that, right? We need to have a sense of where our limits and boundaries are when it comes to that. And so I believe that everyone coming into work in mental health will do very well by completing this and updating it at least every year or two, right? To keep a pulse on where my personal boundaries are. And so you have that worksheet. And then importantly, what I ask for then is, once I'm aware of my personal boundaries, and I know that in recovery-oriented practice, it's important, A, to be aware of my personal limits, and B, to be able to make I statements about these personal boundaries, these personal limits. So let's talk about these I statements, because this is where the art of relationship building comes in. When we've taken this inventory about the things that we're comfortable sharing and things we're not comfortable sharing with program participant, we need to convey these limits in a very respectful way. So we use I statements for that. And they're very respectful statements, as you know, but also importantly, when we do it, it role models healthy boundaries. It role models how to negotiate boundaries in a close relationship. And that is a very real task for many people on their journey of recovery. So for instance, a program participant who's struggling to find her own personal motivation for using psych meds asks the therapist if they've ever used psych meds. Sure, I'm comfortable sharing that I've used psychiatric meds in my life. I don't want to get into the details, but in a small way, I can relate to your ambivalence about using meds, you know. But on the other hand, there are times when we're going to say no. And the way we say it, again, is with an I statement. So here in this example, the staff person says, this person was asked, about their religion and their spiritual practice. And the person says, well, you haven't done anything wrong by asking, but I'm not comfortable sharing information about my religion. To me, that's part of my private life. That's a very powerful reframe. It's saying you haven't done anything wrong, but hey, to me, that's part of my private life. And I'm not comfortable sharing it. That is so different than, whoa, that's a boundary violation, right? Okay, so it's a much more effective way of communicating. And it's downright therapeutic even, right? Because we're role modeling a healthy, consistent boundaries. So, and finally, we have client preferences, and that's the fifth part of the algorithm. So let's say that, have you ever taken psych meds? And my personal limit might be that, sure, I might be willing to answer that question, but that's only the fourth, and now we add the fifth factor. So client preference. And in my surveys, I found clients were all over the place with regard to how they felt about staff sharing. I heard a lot of, I don't want to know anything about staff's lives. And that was really surprising to me because I thought everyone would be fascinated, but no, some people were like, heck no. I heard it should be a real relationship between staff and clients, and they should give some personal information. They want that sense of realness. But then I also heard that the staff shouldn't burden us with their problems. It's my turn to talk, not theirs, right? And finally, people, of course, have preferences about wanting staff hugging or touching me. And I think this becomes really important when we also put an overlay of cultural differences sometimes with regard to just things like eye contact, right? In some cultures, making prolonged eye contact is considered quite disrespectful. And so we need to remember that client preferences play an important part in the co-creation of the algorithm. So what we have is we have three consistent factors. Ethics is consistent, role expectations are consistent, clinical concerns are consistent, personal limits and client preferences are flexible. And when used together, it helps us co-create respectful relationships. Essentially, if we return again, have you ever taken psych meds? The basic answer is all things being the same, and if it has met the clinician's personal limit or the peer specialist's personal limits, there's nothing intrinsic to the question that says we need to withhold this information because the individual is making it clear that he would like to know, that he's making his preference known. But now I want to just imagine a slight change, right? Imagine that this individual has had three pretty overwhelming episodes of mania over the past 20 months. And the team has worked with him to discover his early warning signs or the behavioral hierarchy that begins to lead from hypomania into a full-blown manic episode. And in doing that work directly with the individual, he's doing a wellness plan for himself, a wellness recovery plan for himself, and he's looking at his early warning signs, right? And we're supporting him in that work, and he discovers that first, he starts having these feelings of euphoria and loving the brightness and wonderfulness of humanity, but then next comes a lot of cleaning, and then he really starts finding it more difficult to fall asleep, or if he finally falls asleep, he has trouble staying asleep. And then he starts asking some very personal questions of people, and that's a pattern, and that's sometimes followed by some inappropriate sexual advances, giving some extravagant gifts, and then that's the hierarchy. So now what we have is this sequence that we've helped him discover that, right, in terms of his self-care, and this culminates in rehospitalization due to mania. Now, in this situation, I think we can easily see where this clinical concern, which we've also discussed with him, right, about this escalating pattern of kind of intrusiveness, right, including asking questions and is something that the team does not want to participate in. In fact, the job of the team is to call his attention to it because it's a flag. And so one way we could respond to the question here is to say to him, okay, well, the team has flagged, this in the care plan, and to really say what we've got going on here is a clinical concern. We really shouldn't just use our personal limit with this. We really have to think about the clinical. And then our model here, the clinical concern kind of trumps all the other concerns if the team has flagged it. And so, and to say to him, look, you haven't done anything wrong by asking if I take psych meds, but I'm concerned your question and the fact that you're not sleeping well may mean you're having early warning signs of mania. Do you remember we agreed to flag that in the early stages? Let's take a look at our wellness plan, right? And so on the one hand, we were respectful. We acknowledged the question was asked. We didn't put him down for asking the question, but we rerouted him to our agreement, right? And so I think that this is a very important method, this 5-part algorithm. It's consistent, it's flexible, and it is also an effort to co-create a good human recovery-oriented relationship. So what I've done is also offering you a worksheet to use in your program. And if you're struggling with a challenging situation in terms of personal boundaries, this will walk you through the algorithm, okay, and let your team discuss it and come up with a plan about how to handle or how to approach personal boundaries with that particular individual. So 2 important worksheets I've given you. 1, please use it, embed it in your program, make it part of onboarding new staff, help people discover and stick with their personal limits, and repeat perhaps every year, every 2 years, to stay in touch with personal limits in order to be humanly fully available to people. Secondly, work the algorithm day in and day out with people, ethics, role expectations, clinical concerns, personal limits, client preferences. And what this implies in terms of our practice is that we've got to talk with people early on, right? Early on about our relationship and ask the person, how do you feel about if I were to send you a happy anniversary on your sobriety text? Would you be okay with that? Or, how would you feel if you ever just disappeared and I couldn't find you, I couldn't make contact? Would it be okay for me to look at your Facebook page? And really get that dialogue started. It saves a lot of pain down the road. So I have a couple more examples, and based on the information that I'm giving you in the little scenario, I just want you to think about, are there any concerns? And so here's a scenario. Claire, a woman you provide services to, just came into the office and told you that her mother had a stroke last night and is in the hospital. She becomes teary, and while you were comforting her, she asks for a consoling hug. She's a trauma survivor, and it is noted in her treatment plan that physical contact may be triggering. Any concerns here at all? Take a moment, you can pop it in. I think clearly there is a concern here, and it is clinical concerns, right? So it would be the third factor in the algorithm. And so given this, and understanding that if there is a clinical concern that has been documented by the team, discussed by the team, that therefore it's going to trump any other factor. So I may be fine with hugging. You know, she's asking for a hug, okay? But the clinical concern is going to rule my action here. So given that, I can use my I statement. I can say, I'm so sad to hear your mom had a stroke. Tell me more about what happened. Remember that your treatment plan said it's best not to give hugs right now, but I'm here for you. Tell me what happened. Okay. You've been providing services to Diego for a little over a year. He's come a long way in his recovery and wants to thank you by taking you to a basketball game. He will buy the tickets. You both like the team and often share that common interest with one another. Any concerns in this scenario? Anything you'd be concerned about? Well, I hope that you're picking up that there's an ethical concern here. There's an ethical concern here. The staff person in this situation ought to be concerned about accepting expensive tickets to a game, and that this could be construed as a form of exploitation. And this can be a very slippery slope, right? If it was a local high school game, maybe I'd agree to split the ticket and let's go. You know, but you know, Celtics game, maybe not so good. Maybe not a good idea. Okay, so I hope you get a feel for this. So again, we're going to use the I statement to respond. Diego, you're so amazing. Thank you so much. You've come so far in your recovery, and I only hope that the Celtics can come and that they win. I'd love to go to the game, but I just can't accept an expensive ticket like that. But thank you so much. And I'll go if I can buy my own ticket and you buy your ticket, and then we can go. Okay. Another one. You've been working with Hallie for the past 8 months. She's made a lot of progress toward her goals. Her parents are having a Christmas party, and she asks if you will come to the party since you've played a big part in her recovery. Are there any concerns here? I think the concern here, if I were to circle it, would be role expectations. Is it a part of the role of a peer specialist or a psychiatrist or a therapist or case manager to socialize at a private party, Christmas party? And I think that's the struggle here. So again, I would use the I statement to convey, Hallie, I'm really proud of you for how far you've come in the past 8 months. because I work with you, it's not cool for me to attend your family party, but I would like to celebrate with you during work hours, right? What could we do to celebrate your progress? How about getting lunch together and I'll buy you a coffee? That kind of thing, right? Where we're acknowledging the intent, the spirit, the importance of the relationship, celebrating the work, celebrating the success, but we're not friends. And sometimes I see peer staff drifting into kind of paid friendship roles. And as peer specialists, we really got to watch out for that. Love to do a talk for you someday on that kind of drift into paid friendship, because that's a pretty slippery slope too. But let's just be clear that within the role, we're not friends, no matter how much we enjoy a person. Yeah. Okay, one more. You've been working with Celine for a few months, and you're both close in age and have similar interests. You receive a friend request from Celine on your personal Facebook page. Any concerns? So here, there really are no ethical concerns. Role expectations, bit. We don't know of any clinical concerns given what we've got here. This really is going to come down. He's making his preference known, which is for us to accept his friend request. It's really a lot about personal limits. And I also know that organizational policy sometimes dictates procedures for this kind of situation as well. So again, I think depending on our personal limits and if our organization has a direct policy about social media and agency staff, we would have to follow through, again, using the I statement and being respectful as possible. So Celine, thanks so much for your friend request on Facebook. We bring that up. I'm sorry, but I have to tell you that I can't accept your requests. My agency has a policy that says staff can't friend clients on social media. You haven't done anything wrong in asking. It's just the rules at my agency. Are you cool with that? Okay. So on that note, I have some questions that I want to toss out to you, but I also want to go with your questions first. So I'm going to stop screen sharing now, and Maria is going to help me with any thoughts, comments, etc.
We had a question in the Q&A box. When asked a personal question, what are your thoughts on asking why they're asking in an effort to identify the underlying reason they are seeking the information? For example, have you ever taken psych meds may just be a way to say, I'm worried about the new medication I'm on and I'm looking for more information about it.
That's interesting. Yeah, so I'm personally going to recommend that we avoid that sidestep. I think we were all trained to do it. We were trained to say, so first, what interests you in that? Why do you want to know? I think that it keeps us from, sorry, did this come back on? No, just a little glitch. Sorry about that, guys. So my own sense is that we really shouldn't sidestep it, that we really should say to the person what our personal limits are with regards to sharing our own history with psych meds, as long as there are no clinical contraindications to that effect. So,
and again, feel free to put any questions into the Q&A box. So not in the chat, but if you go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see Q&A. Click on there, and that will help us to kind of facilitate any other questions you have for Pat. Lots of comments. I mean, I think if I could just pull out a couple, the person who had the history of trauma where personal contact or touch would trigger that person. And so just comments about, concerns that denying a hug could also potentially have an impact, and trigger because of not, hugging her and offering that support.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's why having these discussions early on in a relationship with people, and it's not the kind of thing where, it's like, hey, we're starting out and we're getting to know each other and we're learning how to work well with each other. And I just have a few questions for you about how I should handle situations, what your preferences are about pat on the back or touch, or what are your preferences about, hearing about me? Do you mostly, I just think it's a good, it's guaranteed gift giving. If you're in a longer term relationship, it's going to come up, or sending a card. What's the rules regarding contact after you're done with services? And these things are going to happen. And it's best to get ahead of the curve so it doesn't come in such a devastating way where it feels like rejection, for instance, right? Oh, you didn't give me a hug, so therefore I'm bad, or something, triggering in that sense, right? Good question.
There was a question about how do you feel about people in recovery reporting their status in recovery, particularly in working with somebody like a substance use professional. So it sounds like if this person's working with a substance use professional, but they're being asked to report on their recovery on a regular basis. What I think the question is actually about the provider. And so people talking about their own recovery status when they're working in a substance abuse setting, treatment setting.
Well, I think it's very profound if one is willing, in terms of personal limits, to share that. It qualifies us, if you will, as having some of the lived experience. So I didn't just learn this in a book. And at the same time, avoiding any kind of grandstanding ego stuff, and really having some firm boundaries about what we're willing and not willing to put out there. A lot of people say to me, Pat, you're so open, you should do an autobiography. And it's like, heck no, you do not want to know about my life. It's so ordinary, it's not funny. But at the same time, there are certain things we choose to share. It's a gift. And so I have stories that I'm willing to share, but never a book. You know what I'm saying? So I think, because let me just share this, okay? This is my real thinking on what makes for a good story. What makes for a really good story is when the story has universal resonance to the human experience itself. That's what makes a story something to remember, something to be inspired and moved by. So when I disclose a story about having been told that I was diagnosed with chronic undifferentiated schizophrenia and would never be well, that I had to leave the hospital, avoid stress, and take my medication, I tell that story not because it's particularly fascinating, but because it has this resonance. And you don't have to have been in the hospital. You just need to know something about what it means to have been up against a wall and feel like your life is about to be over, existentially at least, right? Oh my gosh, it's over. Everything has crashed around me. It's all the authorities. That's what people remember. So our disclosure really can be a beautiful gift when we do it from our heart and we share the aspect of the story that is universal, that pretty much most human beings are going to be able to resonate to and understand. That's what makes disclosure powerful.
I like that further clarification of what is it, the power of the story, and what is it, what's the intention, how can you make an impact with the response that you're giving, the story that you're providing.
Yeah, it's such a gift to share the story. It's so moving.
Yeah, and I think in this one, because it's substance abuse, that's often an area, it's a role, expectation thing, right? So how do you, as a peer, kind of share your experience, and yet what do you feel comfortable with, or what's not okay to share, really navigating those waters?
Yes, and the truth is, when we share a story, it makes us vulnerable a little bit. I'm not super into being super vulnerable because it's hard to have, but a little vulnerable relationally is scary, In other words, so I was talking to a psychiatrist the other day who has begun sharing that he has a son in his early 20s who has been diagnosed with psychosis and wasn't willing to really start sharing about that until the son was doing a whole lot better. But was debating whether or not to share that ever with a person that he was working with, right? And it's a very tricky question because I could see where, it would be a beautiful thing to hear that was a dad and he knew intimately about loving someone with it. But at the same time, it opens you to being hurt, where I could imagine a person being really angry maybe and saying, you don't know, just because your son, somebody, it opens you up in a way that makes you vulnerable. And so that's where that exercise around personal limits becomes important. Yeah.
Like that. We have a question on suggested I statements for a client who continues to insist that he and I are friends, that he sees me as a friend. I am more and more feeling like I need to assert this boundary directly, but do not want to do so harshly. Thoughts on kind of wording for something like that? I statements.
Well, I think at some point it's not worth having a fight over. It's a word. And if you're clear that you're not a friend, and the person, and you've been clear with the person, I'm not your friend. So this is the reason within the disability rights movement, there's long been a critique about the way human services works, behavioral health services work. And that is that eventually the care can get so segregated, and you're in your Section 8 and blah, blah, that the only people you see are people who are paid to be with you. And that's a terrible, terrible form of poverty, impoverishment. And that, so that we begin to look to staff as friends, because it gets to be inconceivable that a regular person in the community would want to hang out with me. And so we start looking to staff for friendship. That's a kind of desperate place to be saying, I need you because you're paid to be with, and friends don't get paid to be with friends. And friends don't write clinical notes on friends or billable Medicaid notes on friends. And that the hope that I bring to this relationship, I view my relationship with you as a bridge that's arcing out into the community. Our relationship is the bridge over which you can cross into the world of unbelievably rich, communion with a community. And that's the message. So I wouldn't, if you've been clear, I am not your friend and I sure care a lot about you and I'm walking on your recovery with you, all that good stuff, and they still want to call it a friendship, I'm not going to argue that fine print as long as I've been clear.
Like a bridge, thinking of it as a bridge.
Yeah, the relationship. And that is the hope. Because if I gave up on you, then okay, I'll be your friend because I know it's that you're never going to have a real friend because friends don't get paid to be with friends. So that's our hope. That's the gift we offer.
Mm-hmm. I like that one. Yeah. When working in a non-clinical setting, such as the client's home or a less formal setting, what are your thoughts on accepting food or drinks from a client? Some cultural values may see a refusal as an insult or offense. What are your thoughts on navigating these situations? Great question, Rachel.
That's a wonderful question. And I think that sometimes taking that cup of tea can mean the world, right? And to another person in terms of an affirmation of their worth and of their value and of their dignity, and it can be a beautiful thing. So again, in the algorithm, the thing I'm going to circle is exploitation, because that's the danger zone there. Is the idea that we're going to come over daily for breakfast. It's one thing, right? Because that's the slippery slope. but the occasional tea, or once in a while I bring the cookies, or whatever the thing is, that there's a sense of some negotiation about that. I think that can be particularly tricky when, for instance, you're working in maybe a supported apartment program and helping people learn some cooking skills, and you've been working in the afternoon and dinner's ready and they invite you to sit down and you're hungry. And I think it's fine. I mean, as long as you have talking about it and don't make a habit of it, or once in a while you bring them.
Kind of both, sort of co-created.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. So this is in the chat, and I think it's got a question at the end. So we always say we are friendly professionals, and we discuss our boundaries and the importance of establishing some boundaries around our relationship before we enroll individuals in our recovery programs. Peer support should be mutual, respectful, and authentic, but we are taught how to fold in parts of our story in a way that is comfortable for us. I think it's more of a comment. But beautiful, yeah, statement of the role and navigating kind of both of those things.
Yeah, and I have a great worksheet that's a little bit different for peer specialists on thinking through mutual disclosure, what we're willing to do. So I'll send that along to Maria after
That'd be great.
Done, and she'll get it out to you guys who are peer specialists. It's slightly different because our role expectations are different. But the fact that you guys are talking about professional boundaries upstream is really great programmatically. Well done.
Yeah, really great. I'm just kind of scanning through in the chat just to see if anybody had put in a question there. Let's see. I mean, just so much appreciation of what you're saying here, appreciating the framework and the algorithm. Kind of one person saying, I've long struggled with feeling defensive about my position and the value of it, especially working in rural social work, mental health clinics. So just really appreciated sort of how to apply use of self and therapeutic relationships, recognizing it's complex, but also really important.
I agree. Yeah, and yeah, I just think it's I like the algorithm myself, because it's real. It comes out of real world practice and not a theoretical orientation. And secondly, I think it empowers us to be humans together.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's the ticket.
Well, what's great about it too, I mean, this is one of many incredible frameworks that you share, and I know was part of the last webinar and the two that you're going to be doing for us in the next couple of months, but that the frameworks help to sort of navigate the complexity. It's not an all or nothing, right?
Yeah.
In any of these decision points, and I think recognizes that complexity in a way that helps you to make decisions that are more nuanced versus that, in this case, boundary. These are all my boundaries and that's it, kind of thing. And I think reflects what everybody is saying in terms of it depends, yes, no.
Right.
People are all over the map on it, right? Mm-hmm. Just lots of very positive comments here. Just
Thank
really,
you guys.
Yeah.
Hey, I just want to put out before everyone hops off, I just want to say, if you come across some awesome ways to think about social media, I still, and the internet in this day where it's so hard to have privacy. If you come across anything that will blow my mind on that, please, pat@patdeegan.com, just send it on in. I would really like to learn from you too. Okay?
In terms of how people are using social media
Or not. In terms of boundaries, professional boundaries.
You have one person who said, I love Mighty Networks as a platform.
Mighty Networks?
Mighty Networks. Yep.
Pat@patdeegan.com. Send me what you got.
Send that. Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
All right. So I'm going to quickly just share my screen just to kind of finalize our day here. I think I have to put it into presentation mode here. Can you see that okay? All right. Okay. Great. So as I said before, your feedback is so important. We really appreciate all of what you put into the chat, and that is super useful. But what will be even more useful to us is if we can have you fill out the evaluation survey. Gabrielle put the link in the chat. We'll also follow up after today's event with the link as well. But if you want to get a head start on it, it shouldn't take you very long. And again, we just take those really seriously to help us to guide and plan. And as you know, this is the second of a 4-part series. So I think it can be helpful for us as well as for Pat as we move forward in that series in future months. And you can find out more about the Northwest Mhttc and register for additional resources and training opportunities at our website. Listed here at www.mhttcnetwork.org/Northwest. You can sign up to receive our newsletter, email us with any questions, or find us on social media. So you kind of will always be kept apprised of the latest coming out, not only within the work that we do, but also across our network, because we have such rich resources across the country in a variety of different topical areas. And again, I once again just wanted to say thank you so much to Pat Deegan for being with us here today. And thank you to everyone for taking the time to learn more about this really important topic. Really great engaged group. Loved seeing all the chats and just the back and forth, and just such an important topic for all of us to kind of get right as we navigate together. And we hope to see you all again during our next 2 webinars, which you'll be hearing about because you've already registered for this one. So we look forward to seeing you all soon. Be well, stay safe. Pat, thank you so much. Take care, everyone.